All right, I think we are live. Let's. Oh, okay. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us live. If you're watching live or if you're watching the recording, thank you for joining us after the fact. I am here today with Daniel and Meredith for Season 2, Episode 10 of Inner Compass Conversations. This episode is called In the Middle of It, Stories from the Thick of Tapering and Withdrawal. So before we dive into that, I'm just going to read our little opening and introduction for everyone, just to remind you all what this is, who we are, who Inner Compass is, what we're doing here, and all of that good stuff. So Inner Compass is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that envisions a world where people have what they need to make fully informed choices about psychiatric drugs, diagnoses, and tapering, and are fully aware of access to the abundant healing available outside of the conventional default mental health narrative. Inner Compass Initiative receives no grants from foundations or government agencies or corporations or anything like that. We exist solely because of the donations of individuals and families who believe in the work that we do. If you are in a position to make a donation and you would like to help support our work, you can do so by visiting our website, www.theinnercompass.org, and clicking on the Support Us button. It's a big yellow button at the top of the page. These conversations, we love having these conversations. We have them usually about once a month. And we really like to pull from all of you in our community when we're choosing the topics for these conversations. So please do feel free to leave a comment below this conversation wherever you're watching it if you have a topic suggestion you would like us to consider in the future. And we encourage you to, comment, ask questions, share things in the chat while the conversation is going. We won't be really actively monitoring the chat, but please feel free to engage there, and we will do our best to leave time at the end to respond to questions and things that come up. So let's jump in. As I said, the conversation today is In the Middle of It, Stories from the Thick of Tapering and Withdrawal. So let me pass it over to you, Daniel, and then Meredith, to just briefly introduce yourselves.
Thanks, Leela. So hi, everyone. My name is Daniel. I work with Inner Compass, mainly in the online community. Working there, I run one of the support groups every Wednesday and also help coordinate the other calls as well, the other support calls. And also I do various other things within Inner Compass in terms of interviewing people for our ICI Stories library as well. So that's me. Over to you, Meredith.
Hi, everyone. I'm Meredith. I'm the Special Projects Director at Inner Compass and found Inner Compass when I was in the thick of it myself a few years ago. And I think probably ended up on some of the calls that Daniel and other community members were facilitating. And those calls became a really, really big part of my healing. And so my passion for Inner Compass, how much it's helped me, how much I've seen it help other people has just continued to grow. And I'm really excited to be here for my first Inner Compass conversation. Thank you guys for having me.
We're so glad that you're joining the conversation. And yeah, I don't think I said more than my name. So I'm Leela. I've been on these before, but for anybody who doesn't know me, I'm the program director at Inner Compass. And I also found ICI when I was in the thick of it quite a number of years ago now. And I think that's, the most valuable thing that all three of us bring to this conversation is that we've all been in the middle of it. We've all been through this. And so we viscerally understand what it feels like to just feel, total, like there's no way forward. Like how can you possibly ever find a way forward through this? And we really wanted to speak to this in particular because more of the recent conversations haven't been quite so focused on when you're really in the trenches going through it. And it's all really important stuff, but it felt like a really great moment to speak to this part of the experience. So I would love to hear and share about like what did your earliest days or your hardest moments look and feel like in this?
Daniel, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's so many different stages, and they're all got their own story and their own level of intensity. But I think to start us off, the first time I'd been on antidepressants for a very long time, and I'd had some withdrawal symptoms coming off that had been unpleasant, and that made me want to go back on them. Lots of had very severe anxiety, had this kind of chemical depression coming off. But the first time I was like, oh boy, this is serious. This is bad. Was when I switched off Paxil to Prozac, and I got hit with withdrawal, a sort of delayed withdrawal while I was still on the Prozac, and it was like being hit by a truck. That's the best way I can describe it. It was just like, it was the most overwhelming, intense experience I had had up to that point. I felt this intense feeling of sense of doom. I had incredible sensitivity to light and sound. I had extreme anxiety, but for no reason. There was no contextual situational reason for it. I had this very deep chemical depression. I had extreme fatigue. I had severe cognitive problems where I had trouble reading or stringing a sentence together, and it just went on and on and on. And the other thing is, I had these really strange pressures going on in my brain at the same time, and it was such an intense experience that at first I just didn't know what to make of it. But one thing I was absolutely positive of was that this was some kind of synthetic or chemical reaction. I was absolutely convinced, without any doubt, that this was not, some sort of mental health crisis or stress response. This was something malfunctioning as a result of the drugs in my system. So yeah, that's my first taste. I can talk about the other stages later on, but over to you, Meredith, about your experiences.
Yeah. I explain my experience almost in these stages. Stage one is when I've been in sheer survival. Like there's no, I'm someone who's had a meditation practice for 15 years, was a Reiki practitioner for a long time, like so many tools, yoga, all the things. And at that stage one of withdrawal, nothing came with me. I didn't get to lean on any of those things. It was truly surviving moment by moment.
Mm-hmm.
At the thick of it for me, I woke up at 4 a.m. every morning and would dry heave until about 2 p.m. So I couldn't, for a few months, I wasn't keeping any food down. I think at one point I was 90 pounds. It was a few months of not being able to eat because I would just, it was such a physical anxiety that I had never experienced in my life pre-drugs, and I know we hear many people say this, but it's like the anxiety and the panic attacks that I had that led me to go on the drugs were nothing compared to that withdrawal anxiety. Similar to what you're saying, Daniel, there was this awareness in me that it felt like this toxicity was dumping through my body every single day. And this like inner tremor, so mine was, I guess, what you can call the internal akathisia. So you couldn't see I was in akathisia. I wasn't necessarily shaking externally. I mean, sometimes I would in the mornings and the evenings, but it was more this inner tremor that made it that I was just, I've often felt like I was dead in an alive body. So that was a lot of it for the thick of me, was just basically this 24/7 terror. I'd usually get relief around like 6 p.m. on the dot. And, and then in the morning, it was like an alarm clock, like right at 4 a.m. It's like, boom, it's just Groundhog Day over and over. And so, yeah, it was like that it's been like that on and off for 4 years, but I think in the thick of it for me lasted several months of the dry heaving, the akathisia, the terror, the panic, the nausea, the dizziness. Couldn't stop crying, just like hysterically, and just begging, like, if there's a God, really in those moments, feeling like I had been abandoned by the universe or God. I feel like I've always had a relationship to spirituality, to this thing bigger than me. And in the thick of it, it really, I describe it as living hell. Even to this day, I'll still describe it as like, that's the hell realms that I was in. And I would just beg. I would all day just please, please, please make this stop. Please, please, please make this stop. And I think the last thing I'll say, and you guys might want to expand more on this too, and I also want to hear from you, Leela, what it was like in the thick of it. SI was a really big part of it for me for a long time. It's been a few months for me now that I haven't experienced that, but and I just want to make a distinction here that feels important. It's not that I actually, wanted to die. It's that I wanted to live so badly. And the suffering was so immense that it's like, well, what's the point if I'm suffering this much? If I can't eat, I can't be with my friends, I can't sing, I can't dance, I don't have any access to joy and pleasure. When, for you guys will get to know me, but I'm this, I grew up in theater and dance. I lived in New York for a lot of my 20s. I would describe myself as a very social, bubbly, happy person. Also very sensitive, very, very sensitive, which is probably what led me to drugs. But so I think the SI was also a really, really big part of it for me. And just feeling like it was never going to end. There's like an amnesia I think we hear people describe when they're in the thick of it, if tapering or withdrawal, when you're really in the symptoms, where it's almost like in those moments, it was as if I had never experienced joy in my whole life. It's like, this is all that exists now. And this is all that will ever exist. It's really hard. It was really hard in those moments to be able to see that there was ever going to be joy ever again. And to be able to see that there was joy before this. So that was, I could say more, but that was a lot of the pieces for me. And having to move back in with my parents, unable to take care of myself. My executive functioning is offline. I can barely shower. I can't make myself food. I need somebody else to make sure I'm eating or I'm not going to eat. It was like going back into a full baby state, but even worse. I almost feel like a baby could do more than I felt like I was able to do. So I'm laughing about it now, but by far the most horrific thing that, I still to this day will never make sense of. And for those of you, this word SI that I'm using, it's suicidal ideation. Okay. And I want to pass over to you, Leela. What was it like for you in the thick of it?
Well, I think I just want to touch on one thing that you shared, which is this experience of when you really are in it, nothing else exists and nothing else has ever existed and nothing else can exist. And, I would go in and out of that, and every single time, it didn't matter how many times I'd gone in and out of it. I couldn't even count how many times I'd gone in and out of it through my process. But every single time I was in it, it was the only thing that ever was or ever would be. And then I would come out of it and I would be like, Oh, yeah, right. Why couldn't you remember that when you were in it? Because how many times have you been in and out of it by now? But then it didn't matter because the next time I was in it, it was the only thing that had ever existed and the only thing that would ever exist. And so that experience really is so, I don't quite want to use the word universal, but it's such a, so many of us experience exactly that. Sense that there's nothing else. There's never been anything else. There can never be anything else.
And quickly, I'll say, because you've mentioned this too, Leela, it can go the other way, where like once you're, on the other side or you're not in the thick of it, it can be hard to fathom just the level of suffering you were in. And I know that has been a big part of your experience. And I'm in that right now too. It's hard for me to even conceptualize that that was the state I was in only a few months ago.
Yeah. Yeah. It can go both ways. Absolutely. Um, my, a lot of my experience felt very, I had a much more physically intense experience, I guess. I didn't so much, I wasn't so much dealing with, neuro emotions or really, really intense emotional, kinds of experiences, but I felt for years like I used to describe it like I'm slowly being poisoned. Like there's just enough of something in the water to make me feel really sick all the time. I was itchy every day for 10 years, just about. Unrelenting itchiness. Um, I would, I would have this frequent, intermittent, pretty extreme fatigue. Um, am I going to be able to get off the couch today and do the things that I need to do? Who knows? Right? I would often feel like maybe I was coming down with the flu, especially if I had tried to do too much. I had, brain fog, cognitive, like memory, like I couldn't remember certain things or I couldn't recall words in the middle of conversations. When I was really in it, I would trail off in the middle of a sentence and not even remember that I had been talking until the person I was talking to is like, are you going to finish your thought? And I'd be like, oh, what? Was I saying something? um, all kinds of GI stuff that went on for me, like lower GI. There was a period of time where it felt like everything I ate would run through me in 20 minutes. Like I don't know that I was absorbing any nutrients from my food for a bunch of months there. Sorry if that's a little graphic, everyone. um, there were times where I couldn't sleep, and there were times when it felt like all I could do was sleep, and it wasn't enough. Um, I used to say I feel like I've been hit by a truck. I would wake up and say that to my partner like many mornings. I feel like I got hit by a truck. Everything hurt. I had this weird pain. I had like my limbs would feel so heavy, so achy, so foggy. I mean, it just, and like I would be easily overwhelmed, easily overstimulated, like too much light, too much sound, strong smells. It was like all these things were assaulting me, um, and and I never knew sort of what would tip me over to a point where I wouldn't be able to function. So it was like if there were, three things I had to do during the week, and I was working super part-time from home at the time. Like I couldn't have worked a full-time job or like even a part-time job probably that required really specific hours from me. I was lucky to have a kind of job where I could just kind of do it minimally when I wanted to or when I was able to. Um, I was also trying to go to school very part time, but it was like, well, if I have to go to class on Wednesday, can I see my friend on Sunday for a couple of hours, or is that going to be too much? Is that going to knock me out to a point where I might not be able to go to school? It was like engaging with life was down to this micromanaging of my own sort of energetic and physical reserves because I never knew what would send me into this extra sick, extra foggy, extra itchy place. And it went on for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, if I can jump in, so much of what both of you said resonates. I think it's at that stage, when you're in that acute stage, the whole mind over matter thing, like, that, it just doesn't exist really. Certainly coping skills and things can be helpful later on, but at that stage, it just hijacks your brain. You could be some special forces SAS trained soldier, trained in resisting torture. It doesn't matter. The brain's just been overtaken by some kind of destabilization, and you just cannot control your way of thinking or thoughts in any reasonable way. And exactly like you said, Leela, um, when you go in a wave, you're so in it, your sense of time is so compressed, you think you are going to feel that way for the rest of your life. You're absolutely convinced of it. And it doesn't matter if it's like the second wave you've done or the 10th, you still go through that same thing. I know many people, and I did it myself, would like write notes to myself saying, you're in a wave right now. I know you feel like it's the end of the world and you're not going to get out of it, but you will get out of it. I didn't believe it when I read it. I was like, yeah, but this one's different. This one's different. This is a worse one. And I even recorded myself when I was out of the wave saying calmly, "Oh, you're okay." But yeah, you're just absolutely convinced of it, and you just will not reason. You cannot be reasoned with. Um, and then with the SI thing, I think it's important to say as well. You know, with SI, I feel like there's different types of SI. There's kind of there's an existential SI that people have when they feel like, what's the point in living? What's the point in their life, etc. This is very different. I feel it's a very kind of I'm in so much suffering. Like you're not even sure why your reasons for. Besides the suffering, you're not really sure of why you feel that way, but you feel that way. You just can't. So it's very much like I cannot handle one more moment of this, and yeah, I think like this is the reason why withdrawal coaches have appeared, and I do think that they do fulfill a function, the same as success stories do and support groups do as well, in that perhaps the only thing that on some level can help when you're in that deep wave and you're absolutely convinced that you're screwed is to somebody else who's been through it and got to the other side just telling you repeatedly. It's no good just telling you once, just repeatedly telling you that you're going to be fine, like a little frightened child that needs to be reassured like every hour on the hour, just constantly. And that was about the only thing that really worked for me in that time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to just, Daniel, to that point too of the SI and how it feels so different in the withdrawal, through the withdrawal brain or the psych drug harmed brain, injured brain. It was like, yes, like part of it was this like, oh my gosh, like I didn't know a level of suffering like this could exist. And it's just wanting that to stop. And then there's also a part of it that's really intrusive. And there were these like looping thoughts telling me to just end it. And in the moment it feels so real, because especially if it's paired with physical and emotional sensation. um and maybe this will be a good segue into coping strategies that we had while we were in the thick of it, because for me I had to start sort of bargain with that voice and be like, okay, I hear you, let's just wait one more day, let's wait one more week, and we'll come back to this decision, let's wait one more month. And but yeah, to your point too, Daniel, like the mind over matter, like all these things I had learned from, manifestation and meditation, like none of that worked. And so it really was, I just had to like, allow it there was a point of just like allowing it. I couldn't, if I resisted it more, it often got worse, the sensations. But yeah, maybe this is a good segue, unless there's anything either of you guys want to mention about um, other experiences of being in the thick of it. But I'm curious to talk about, yeah, what coping strategies were we able to use?
Just one thing.
And Daniel, I so agree with you too, of like, one of the main things that helped me, the only thing when I was in sheer survival, was just hearing from people repeatedly that I was going to be okay. I'd call my friends, coaches, I'd say, tell me I'm going to be okay. Tell me I'm going to be okay. People who had really, whether withdrawal or chronic illness, and had experienced recovery to some extent. I just needed to hear that over and over. And people would say, what can I do to help? I'd say, there's nothing you can do. Can you just hold the vision for me? Like, imagine me happy and healthy and, tell me I'm going to be okay, because I can't see it. So can you hold it for me right now?
I just, before we go into the positive coping mechanisms, the one sort of negative one I had, which I think we all do, is just the obsession with the forums. Like going
Oh, yes.
going on particular websites, going on the Facebook groups, just reading up about people's stories, trying to find that person with the exact same story as you, and being like, oh yeah, but did they get better? Did they get better? Oh yes, no, and just for hours upon hours, because I think it's just a desire to feel some kind of control over what's happening,
Yeah.
but you're not going to get it. But that's what you do, and often I think it just triggers you and makes you feel worse because you just hear about everybody else's suffering. But that was one of the bad ones. So we can move on to the good stuff now.
No, I think that's a really common one. It was one for me too. I remember when I was in the beginning of acute thick of it for months, I would call every recovery center in the US. I'd call every naturopath, and I wouldn't end up going to see any of them. I just the like inquiry and consultations, the amount of, I feel for all the, practitioners who, I mean, just all the people that I did free consultation calls with, and I just, like you said, Daniel, like, I needed some feeling that I was doing something about it. It always felt wrong to just, or maybe in a way it felt worse to just sit there, because then I was just with my symptoms that felt that, like you said, Leela, were assaulting me and attacking me. And I felt like truly like I was being attacked. But yeah, looking back, I guess it was just a way of passing the time. And that really is ultimately one of the biggest things that has been, on my side, is time. And I remember being so frustrated when people would tell me that you need to give this time. I'd go to the withdrawal coaches, you need to give this time. What can you do? What does bring you relief? And I'd be like, I can't do this 1 minute longer. But now sitting here, it was time. And if my coping strategy at one moment was just, hey, survive 1 more minute, that worked. I'm still here because of being able to do that. Even if there were these other voices screaming, you got to end it, you got to end it.
I think that's really the only coping strategy when things are truly at their worst, is you're just surviving one more moment. That's it. There's no space to be trying to implement something, or some new tool or technique, or even attempting to do something that might shift the way you feel. It's like, it is just about surviving this moment. And then the one after that, right? It's like, you're surviving this moment, and now you're surviving this moment, and now you're surviving this moment. And so often I think so often we feel like we need to be doing more. There must be something else that we can and should be doing, because this is it feels so unsurvivable. But really, just surviving this moment is everything. For me, my experience with forum spaces was a bit different, I would say, because I found my way first to one that was certainly had a lot of pain and suffering and horror in it, but there was always a hopeful undercurrent. And I fairly quickly started helping out in there and started moderating in there. Like for me, being able to throw myself into offering support in the ways that I could, and sharing what I was learning with somebody, like even if they were just like one little step behind where I was, like if I could share something I learned, that really, really helped me. I don't quite want to say make meaning out of it, but it was like, okay, there's some good that I can do here. There's some, maybe there's some purpose to this. There's something that can come out of this. This is a way that I can engage that makes a difference, even if it's a very small difference in a little corner of Facebook. So, and I owe my life today to that group. I wouldn't be drug free without that group. I might not even be alive without that group. But it is true that sometimes we can be overly immersed and overly looking at things where there is no hope. And there was a period where I went and I joined a whole bunch of different things. After I found this one group, I'm like, I'm going to find everything. And I noticed how I felt when I was in those other spaces, and it wasn't doing me any favors. And I had to say, okay, you got to leave these spaces or hide these spaces from your feed or whatever, because we want to find stories that are just like ours, and we want to know exactly what happened. And it can mean we just consume a bunch of really scary stuff that may or may not actually have any bearing on us at all. But especially when you're in it, there's no filter either. There's no way to say, okay, this is this person's experience. That doesn't mean it's not foreshadowing mine necessarily. When you're in it, you can't say that to yourself either. Yeah. Once I was not quite as in it, once there was a little room. I love your sort of 3 stages, Meredith. I'm not sure if my mine quite fit in there, but I love this idea that there are stages.
And not linear too. Like it would come like I'd be in a
Yeah,
stage one, sheer survival. This is like,
yeah,
okay, I have some access. I'm back in stage one, back in stage two. Oh, I'm living my life for a few days. Stage three, back to stage one. But
yeah,
that's my general way of explaining it. I guess it was a way for me to know, oh, Meredith, you're at a level one right now. So your only job is to survive. You do not need to go to the dance class. You don't need to, get your 10K steps in. You just need to survive. What do
yeah,
you need to do to survive? So that's a different like permission slip of like, when I was in stage two, it's like, okay, Meredith, you have a little more access today. We're gonna go for a walk. And I'm like talking to myself like a baby because I had to mother myself. That was a big part of it for me was
hmm
talking to myself every day, like, okay, I'm right here. Wasn't able to access that in stage one as much, but yeah, please, Leela, go on with what
No,
you were
that's. I'm so glad you said that. And when I wasn't in just survive this moment mode, um, I coped by looking at the things that I did have some control over. And I began to view my healing process as like the time it takes to heal is the time it takes to heal. I don't get to control that timeline as much as I want to. And there are probably lots of things that I can do to remove as many obstacles as possible on that path toward healing. And when I began my taper, there was a lot about the way I was living my life that was really not healthy. Like I ate a lot of junk. I consumed in other ways a lot of junk, like junk media, things like that. Um, I poured energy into various different kinds of relationships or activities that didn't really serve me. Um, and I began to sort of look at all of those things and think, okay, is there another like rock from the path that you can move out of the way if you shift something. And so when I had the capacity, that was a big coping strategy. Is there something else I can shift? Is there, you know, I made major diet changes, major changes in what I consume in every sense. I got really clear about where my energy and attention were going, and did it make sense for them to be going to those places and those things. It all sounds really abstract, and I'm far enough removed from it that like every single little thing that I did, I don't remember all of that stuff quite anymore. But the idea that I did have some control over the obstacles, even if I didn't have control over the symptoms or the timeline, was a real anchor when I was at a level above just surviving the moment.
One other thing I was going to say is relationships, and particularly healing buddies. I don't know if you guys had healing buddies or have had them, but yeah, it's such a, God knows what it must have been like before the internet, was so prolific. But I think over time, I managed to get in touch with various people who I kind of made a connection with, and we would often talk on the phone, and they'd be in completely different parts of the world from me. At one point I was talking to someone in India. I talked to a lot of people in the US, other people in other parts of the UK who I never actually met in person. And we would just talk to each other because, I think one thing, and I think we've talked about this on other conversations, is the social isolation of this. It's such a all-encompassing experience that your insertion into ordinary life, you can't help but become withdrawn from ordinary life and other people. You're so consumed by it, and it's such a incomprehensible experience for other people that you're just in your own world of hell. Often the rest of the world is just too much, too overstimulating for you. No one really gets it. You withdraw as well because a lot of people just gaslight you, and that's incredibly painful while you're in such suffering. And so you are quite isolated, and a healing buddy or a support group, it constantly reasserts the fact that you're not going crazy, and that you're not making this up, and you're not mentally ill, and you're not some neurotic person, that this is a real thing, that a lot of people suffer throughout the world, and you need to have that reaffirmation, because you're not going to get it from the medical system, and you're probably not going to get it from maybe the people that aren't experiencing it around you. So you need that validation. And so the healing buddies was really powerful for me to, sometimes you talk 2 or 3 times a day. And it's such a bizarre thing. You become incredibly close, talking about life or death, with people that you've never met, often living on the other side of the world. It's a real experience in of itself. I don't know if you guys had healing buddies as well.
Yeah, yes, I did. I actually, my main healing buddy in the beginning of the thick of it for me, I found through Inner Compass, and found out that she, lived not that far from me. And so oftentimes we'd, spend the day together, and we'd sit on our couch, and we'd both be so miserable. But like the fact that we had each other, and, eventually getting to the point where we could go to the grocery store, and we're like, okay, what are we going to cook tonight? And even if we were miserable, just getting to be together, and, times where she was more in the thick of it and I'm a little more up and I can support her, and times where, I'm more in the thick of it and she's supporting me. So yeah, the Healing Buddies has been so vital. I'll share like some glimmers of hope that started coming in when I was in the thick of it, and 90 pounds and barely eating. And I'll say too, like, this feels like an important part of the story. We've talked about this, because you have people that are like, take this psychedelic drug or take this supplement. And I think that's something to note here too, that can be tricky with the forms, is what works well for one person, sometimes that actually makes another person worse. And when I was in the thick of it, I went and did a psychedelic drug, a really big one, and it totally blew out my nervous system. It was beautiful for about 15 minutes, and then I really felt, wow, I've really done it this time, because someone had told me, this is what we have to watch out for. This is what's going to save you. It's going to take you out of your SI. It's going to make all the intrusive thoughts go away. Well, things only got worse, but that was an important moment for me, because I realized, like, oh, I'm looking for this one thing to just make it all go away in an instant. And that ended up not being the case. And that was an important reality check for me of like, Meredith, this might be a lot longer and slower than you want it to be. But it reminds me of, like, I call it the mother pace. Like, if we look at Mother Nature, if we look at Earth, like, she takes her time. We have these seasons and cycles. There's nothing that's in a rush. And anyways, I could go on a tangent there, but it was after that moment that, I'm still in the thick of it, but I started leaning on the simple things when I wasn't in sheer akathisia. So I would go and lay face down in the grass and just really notice gravity. Like, I would fully give my weight to the ground, and I would just be hysterically crying and praying into the ground. Again, believing nobody's hearing me, but something of just proclaiming, like, I am not okay, I'm not okay, this is not okay, and having the trees and grass witness me. If that sounds a little woo-woo, but something of like, wait, there's a system here, like the sun and the ground. And even if at the time, I can say this now, even at the time, my brain can't comprehend that there was something in me that knew I was being held by something bigger in me, like the tiniest thing. And so I tried to nurture that soul part that, eventually when I had the capacity to go for walks every day, once I was getting more towards stage 2, it became imperative. The second I woke up, I had to go for a walk, barefoot walk specifically. I had to immediately go for a walk. If not, the akathisia attack would be worse and I would spiral all day. The walk was a way that I sort of interrupted. And then I got into brain retraining and DNRS, which is, I bring it up because it's been a really big part of my healing. There's a bunch of brain retraining programs out there, but I also want to say, when I was at a certain level of being in the thick of it, none of the brain retraining was going to work. I had to wait till there was a little more stability. What else? Dogs and cats, cuddling with animals was really big for me. That again, it like all goes back to like this feeling of containment. For a while I was living at my cousin's house, and the dogs would sandwich me. They'd sit on both sides of me. And because it is, like you said, Daniel, it's such an isolating experience. I mean, I think for a full year, 2 years, I talked to none of my friends, and I have a big social circle, and I cut everybody out because people didn't understand, and I was exhausted to try to explain it. And, because withdrawal is still, and psych drug harm is still not a very public thing, people are like, oh my God, you sound like you have a panic disorder. Like, have you talked to your doctor? And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, this part of this is because my doctor told me to go off this drug too fast, and now I'm in a protracted withdrawal. So like, the isolation. And so turning to nature, turning to animals, turning to the barefoot walks once there was a little more access and a little more capacity. And then the one last thing I'll bring up, that was 2 more things. One was taking showers when I was in a really bad akathisia attack. Shower would bring a little bit relief. I remember I would just like watch the water droplets as they would go on the sliding glass door of the shower. Something about that. Um, and so sometimes I would literally, I mean, not water friendly. I would be in the shower for a very long time. Something about like, again, I think a feeling of containment. And I think a last big thing for me in the thick of it has been, these community calls. I remember when I first joined Intercompass Exchange, I had actually called a recovery center, and I'm talking to the woman in admissions, and it's like $30,000 to, like, I don't have the money for that, but I'm so desperate. I'm like, somebody help me. Um, and she's talking to me. She's like, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but my best friend went through exactly what you're describing. And I don't think you're like, I think you might be in withdrawal. And she connected me with her friend. And then her friend told me about Inner Compass. And so I get onto Inner Compass. And I say that to me is such like a God moment, a universal moment of like how, I didn't know withdrawal was a thing. I was already about 4 months into protracted withdrawal and not eating and my dry heaving. And I think that finding Inner Compass, I think finding that other people were going through it 1000% saved my life.
Yeah.
Once I got into Inner Compass and read stories that were like mine, maybe not exactly mine, but just this acknowledgement that this thing is real. It didn't take the symptoms away, but it was so relieving. And I remember getting on my first Inner Compass community call, and the facilitator for some reason didn't make it. And because I have facilitation experience, I used to lead women's circles. It was this moment of, okay, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to facilitate this call, even though, I just joined this organization. I just joined this community. And that moment of, like you mentioned, Leela, of like being helpful, being of service, connecting to others who had gone through it put me in this like transcendent space where I was in so much, I was in that toxicity dump. I was having really intense symptoms. And it's almost like in that moment it transcended, and I was just so present. And I'm not saying that's always right, of like, oh, just go jump into service and go volunteer and go, go be helpful somewhere. But that was a big part of it for me, of like being able to let being in my gifts be vitality, letting myself take what I have gone through and help other people. That has been one of the biggest medicines for me. So yeah, that's a lot of things that I just mentioned, but I also think that's why it's so incredible to be part of Inner Compass Exchange. And you can just show up on a call and be exactly as you are. And you also, if you want to step up and facilitate your own call, you can too. And just navigating that, like, how do we get from being in absolute crisis where we're not functioning and slowly integrate back into life, integrate back into working? I think there's very little out there in our current mental health system industry that is helping people go from, okay, they've lost everything. They've lost their job. They have lost a lot of, body mass. They've lost all their friends. Like, what are those tiny steps to get them reintegrated back into life? And I think that's where the healing buddies and these communities can really be helpful, because I imagine us like walking side by side. We get to do it together. So I think that's so important, so vital.
Showers used to help me too.
Water's healing. Like,
Water's
just
healing,
the elements. It's like the simple, like that's what I learned through this too. It was always actually the simple thing. I tried all the different modalities. I still try all the modalities, but it's been the most simple things, like, holding a baby or cuddling with a cat or being in the grass or taking a shower. And that feels meaningful, even if it pissed me off at the time and still pisses me off. There's something important there, and what that's, I feel like, calling us towards as a collective, as in this time of being humans on earth. It's crazy times. I think there's a quote, I forget who says it. I'll have to put it in the comments after we upload it, but They say, times are urgent. May we slow down? And I just think that's so, obviously hard to say it when you're in the thick of it. I mean, I needed to like match the energy and be moved so quickly. But the more I get further away from it, I'm like, oh yeah, the slow and the simple feels like the more sustainable way of living. And you mentioned that too, Leela, if you want to touch on that a little more, of like the importance of how going through this is going to ask us to change. We're not going to be able to stay, in the habits, patterns, the way that, for me, I think for so many of us who have been psychiatrists, there's a lot of overcompensating, going into people pleasing, staying in toxic relationships. So just, even if it's hard in the thick of it, like there's something maybe really important happening, just opening to the possibility that maybe a change that's going to bring you to a more sustainable way of living, like that's possible.
Yeah. And if that idea feels totally inaccessible, if you're watching this and you're like, what the heck are they talking about? I can't even. We see you also, because we remember what it's like to just feel totally disconnected from any of that sense of possibility. But it's really true also that there can be so much more in it for us, especially once we reach a certain point. And staying open to that, like you said, Meredith, staying open to that when there's space to leave the door ajar for it, is really powerful, and it's another way of coping, honestly.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there's the in the thick of it, just surviving part, and then there's kind of picking up the pieces afterwards when you're not okay, but the sort of sheer just surviving day to day thing is starting to become a bit more manageable, and I think that's when the meaning making part comes, and that's when the helping others part comes out of it. A book that is very popular in the community is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which many of you I'm sure have heard of, but if you haven't, it's a book about a Jewish man who was sent to the Nazi concentration camps during the Second World War and managed to survive when so many didn't. And it's a very small, very short book, and it's his lessons about how he survived. And the key takeaway, or at least one of the key takeaways, is that he found meaning in the suffering. He found purpose and meaning from what he was going through, and drew lessons from that that he could apply later on in his life. And I feel that really resonates with a lot of us. I think it's one of the things that Inner Compass is good at. Is yes, we help people when they're in the thick of it, but we also have space on the support calls and in our forum for people to really make sense of what's happening. And people have different ways of doing it. They have a spiritual, philosophical element, or there's a kind of political, economic critique, systemic critique. Everyone's got like a different angle on it, or making sense of that. And I think also just the helping others as well, and becoming involved. I mean, for me, just like you, Meredith, like facilitating my first call, I had akathisia when I facilitated my first call. I was an absolute mess, but I still pushed through it, and it was immensely meaningful for me. I think also it was this withdrawal pushes you into such a victim state. It's so overpowering. It's like being hit with a tsunami. And I felt like when I did that facilitation, on that first facilitation, it was the first time I was like an active person again. Like I was like fighting in my own way rather than just passively taking beating after beating. It was like, no, now I'm taking control of the narrative, and I think things like the hero's narrative or the hero's trajectory and thinking of oneself in those terms can also help to get out of that very disempowering state that withdrawal can put us in as well.
Yeah, I think it's so important to be considerate of where maybe we give away our power, and where we can step back into it in this. And so, as we wrap up today's conversation, I wonder if either of you, both of you, have like a final thought or reminder or reflection or anything to offer as we close. And if not, that's also fine, of course.
Yeah, I can share something that happened yesterday that feels timely for this. There was a really big storm that came through yesterday, and during the storm, as I'm looking outside, I can't see anything. Like I can't see the view, I can't see the bridge from where I'm staying. Everything is completely just it's like a hurricane outside. The winds, the rain, completely overtaken by this storm. And then 10 minutes goes by and there's the sun again. And I know maybe it's a little silly metaphor, but I really do think tapering, withdrawal, when you're in the thick of it, it can feel like that. When the storm's there, you can't see that there's a future, that there's another side. And I want to say that that's okay. You don't need to see another side. You don't even need to believe you're going to get better to get better. I mean, I often heard, well, you have to believe you're going to get better to get better. And I can tell you, like, for months and years, I did not think I was going to get better, and I still got better. Most days the thoughts I was having, I wasn't thinking positively every day. A lot of the times I was thinking worst case scenario, like very scary thoughts. And even on those days, I was still getting better. And so again, I really think in the thick of it, it can feel like that all consuming, it's like you're being swallowed. Nothing else exists. Nothing existed before or after. And yet something else does exist. That is, and we can look to nature to show us. Like I think stagnancy, staying stuck, like I've never heard of a case where someone stayed the same their whole life. I think there's always evolution. And so if you're in the thick of it right now, I want to say to you, there is absolutely hope. You absolutely, absolutely, absolutely can and will get through this. And if you need, for now, other people to remind you of that, who've been through it too, that is okay. You do not have to believe it. It is so, so, so possible for you too. So yeah, that's what I would say. And that was what I needed to hear at the time too, was just that there was another side, that there was another reality. And even today, I still live with so many symptoms. Like, I'm not perfect. I barely sleep. I, still struggle so much with my gut. But there's more access to being present and to pleasure and to love. And, I appreciate life so much more now, so much more now. The integrity that I have, the relationships I have are so beyond anything I could have ever imagined. And I don't know if I'd have this level of gratitude and appreciation if I hadn't gone through what I went through with withdrawal and psych drug harm. I still can't make sense of it. I still think it is a meaningless thing. I'm not saying like, oh, this happened for a reason. I still look back and I say, really? Did it really need to be that bad? Does it still need to be this bad? Do people really need to go through it that intensely? I don't have an answer. And so I just want to say that too. You also don't have to have the answers or have it figured out to also be able to heal. I never found the perfect supplement that I was always looking for. I never found the perfect healing modality or therapy. Actually, my healing happened through being in the presence of loving witnesses, of people who believed in me and just kept encouraging me to hold on. Yeah. What about you, Daniel and Leela?
No, really, really excellent what you're saying. I think just a very basic message. It's a cliche, but I think cliches are not necessarily bad things when you're going in the thick of it. You need repetitive phrases. Just this too shall pass. That's what I would say. Is we've talked about how much you're convinced that everything is permanent, that you're permanently damaged, that the state and the way you feel right now is how you will feel forever. That's an illusion. That's what your brain has been hijacked. It's just destabilized, and it's telling you those things. I had akathisia. I had akathisia for over 3 months. Pretty serious. I was pacing 10 hours a day. I no longer have akathisia. I have no akathisia whatsoever. Um, and, just to say as well, you're not alone out there. There's a whole load of people, there's a whole community of people that understand you, that believe you, that validate you. And, if you don't have the resources, if you don't have the capacity, the strength to reassure yourself, find other people within the community that will, and that will believe you and validate you as well. That's what I would say.
Yeah, thank you both. I would say that the idea of permanence is a trap. Healing takes the time it takes. But just because a journey or a process seems to be going on and on and on in an unending way, you just have no idea what tomorrow could bring. And I know what it's like to have this go on for years and years, to a point where it felt reasonable to wonder, what if I never get better? But the idea of permanence is a trap. If you're still here, there's a reason to believe that things can and will eventually shift for the better.
Well said, you guys.
So thank you both so much for having this conversation with me today. And thank you, all of you, for joining us. Whether you've been watching live or you watch this recording later, we so appreciate you being here. And once again, if you would like to submit topics or questions or anything like that for future conversations, we would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment on this conversation wherever you're watching it. And as Meredith mentioned the exchange, both Meredith and Daniel mentioned the exchange. So in case anybody is not familiar, Inner Compass Exchange is our off Facebook private membership network, and it is a really vibrant community with forum spaces and chats and multiple weekly community-led Zoom calls. I think we have calls. I think we have calls at least 4 days a week at this point.
Yes, we have
Where
Wednesday,
people,
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
yeah, amazing. And so people can connect live with each other, and we would really love to have you join if you're not already there. You can visit exchange.theinnercompass.org to learn more and sign up. And finally, if you appreciated this conversation and you would like to help support ICI once again, we encourage you to make a donation if you're in a position to do so, because we exist solely because of the donations from individuals and families who believe in what we do. Recurring donations of any amount make the biggest difference, and we are so appreciative of your support. You can donate by visiting our main website, theinnercompass.org, and click the Support Us button at the top of the page. And thank you again, everyone, and we will see you for the next conversation.